So I get the privilege of doing our closing keynote, and I want to talk a lot about how you get this into action. And I think as the morning's gone on, we've gone from the promise and the theory and tried to get this more and more tangible towards things that we can place.
You've automated the routine. You've set the foundation. Now, it's time to go further. Not just to move faster, but to move smarter. From automation to intelligence. Meet your new Treasury Analyst. This is TellMe, a living intelligence, not artificial, collective, powered by the Embat network, trained by over 250 finance teams, shaped by people, enriched by data, refined by a century of shared expertise, guided by your decisions. It's always on, always thinking ahead, adapting to how you work, designed for security, trusted by teams like yours. This isn't just automation, it's collective intelligence, smarter by design, sharper every day, part of your team now. Need anything? Just tell me.
That's one of those few moments the video works. And Treasury, TellMe stands for the Treasury Enrichment Large Language Model from Embat, so we just love an acronym. But Embat, just very quickly, is a Treasury platform. We do cash management. Just a few numbers for you. We're north of 300 customers. By design, we go after customers that have complexity in their banking landscape or in their entities, and so by virtue of that, we're in, or our clients have banking relationships and complexity across more than 50 countries globally. We've got teams here in London, in Germany, and Spain, and we're backed by some big investors. But what I really want to talk about is how we get from those AI trends and try and put you in the mindset of how a software company that's applying AI like we are, how that trickles down into features, because we're at this very interesting inflection moment. So we did this survey of finance teams. So there were just over 150 respondents. These were all customers of Embat. And they were all looking at how they could implement AI in Treasury and how that was a priority. And you'll see as I go through this that how those prioritizations filter through into the things that we produce. I couldn't resist the urge to talk about this because the Nobel Prize for Economics came out about 3 or 4 weeks ago, which you may have seen. And if anybody did Aggie on Howard models at university, you've probably got PTSD from them. But they were talking about creative destruction. And Aggie on Howard described how new advances in technology get adopted. Electricity, which was mentioned earlier, is one of the classic ones they talk about. It took 50 years to get from electricity being able to run a factory to the loss of steam power factories leaving. And all these guys have been in the press, talking to The Economist, talking to the FT the last few weeks, and all they're talking about is how AI is the fastest example of this and how it's driving the most dramatic piece of creative destruction probably that we've seen in our economies. And that's mirrored when you look at some of the data from CFOs. So I pulled this Waters Clueless survey, which was from May of this year. And in May of this year, only 6% of finance leaders had rolled out an agentic AI agent, right? A tiny number. But in the same survey, I think it's 38% had an intention or had a clear plan to roll out an agentic agent in the next 12 months. So it's a 600% increase in a year. So the speed of this is just almost unbelievable. And I know we keep saying that, but it's worth just thinking about how fast it's coming. And I think when we have this conversation in a year's time, and hopefully we'll come back for that, we'll be talking about this in a very different way. So from an Embat perspective, we sit between the banks, and have banking connectivity, something that's been generally difficult, and then layer AI over that transactional data to try and drive outcomes. And there was a lot of talk in some of the panels about how you engage with AI, and this is really how we think about AI and how we develop it? And how do you get to a point that you trust it with things that are really high stakes, the transactional data in your finance team, right? This is an area you can't afford to have those hallucinations. And so how do you balance the human in the loop with the automation? We've been through a period over the last 20 years where we did automation, but we did it with very tightly parameterized rules. And we're now at a point where, by setting the intent or by using, AI models that can learn, you can move much further beyond that sort of standardized automation that we spent the last 20 years thinking about. So we roll it out 3 ways, right? The first is what we call silent mode. But this is low-hanging fruit. This is things where you can train an AI model and you can be really confident in the outcome. And if I take an example, classic example for a finance team is categorizing transactions. If you wanted to produce a historical cash flow, you need to categorize all of those transactions and push them across. That is not a difficult thing for an AI to do, right? It's easy enough for an AI to say, well, I see that supplier is always a cash flow from operations, paying suppliers, and start to do that work for you. And that takes a huge amount of the burden off of your teams. The second example, and this is probably the one you see the most, is guided mode. And this is really where the user in the loop is critical, because you have to have that end point every time, because the action that it's performing is so vital. So here, you're trying to put an AI agent next to a finance leader that is offering you guidance, offering you a suggested route, and you're able to talk to it and say, well, actually you got that one wrong, or 99% of these are right, but here's one that's not. And classic example of that is payments, which was mentioned earlier. I think Tony brought it up. You don't want your AI agent to execute payment. You might want it to try and fix the bank details to avoid the payment being rejected. There are lots of things that the AI can do there, and it might suggest them to you. But ultimately, as the finance leader, you need to stay in the loop and stay, connected to it at the end. And of course, these things learn. And so we always kind of joke that it is like hiring in our case, a treasury analyst or a grad for most of you. And it takes a few months, it takes 2 or 3 months. You train your systems, and they're able to learn and develop and get better at guiding these. And I think that relates to one of the workforce points that people were making earlier. Not only do you need to hire different skills, but it's very hard. It's getting harder to hire the skills if you don't have AI. If you take a bright grad out of LSE now, he doesn't want to sit and categorize transactions, because who would when they're used to in their kind of B2C consumer life dealing with a typical AI interface. So it's not just a finance problem, it's an HR problem for you as well. And then that last one is the one they're used to, which is ask mode. And there you're really thinking about this in the context of a ChatGPT style interface. And I'll take you through these examples. These are the ones I was talking about. But the reality is, of course, all of these approaches are wrapped up together. So here you can see that I've got a conversational interface with my finance system, with my treasury platform in this case, and I'm asking it questions. And from those questions, it's able to perform those actions in different ways. So some of them are really deterministic. It knows that 340 can just be categorized automatically. I know exactly what to do with that. I really don't need you as the user to waste time on this, right? There are some, though, where it's going to say these remain uncategorized. I might give you the suggestion as the AI agent TellMe. I might say, hey, this is what I think it is, but I'm not prepared to make that final judgment because I don't have a high enough threshold of confidence in the decision that I'm making. Forecasting is another classic example, and I think it relates to the thresholds we were talking about. Somebody was saying earlier, your forecast is always wrong, right? The question is, what tolerance are you prepared to accept in your forecast? And the same thinking applies to the AI, which is what is the threshold of accuracy that I want in my forecast to help me do this? And you can take out a lot of that base effort, the transactional work to get to your forecast. And then you can use that predictive analytics to try and go further. We all know it's going to be wrong, but it'll take you hopefully much, much closer. And it'll start to spot things, the AI, that aren't just you need a human in the loop to spot them, but they're things that you would have never spotted in the first place. And classic examples in forecasting are things like you've got that forecast in for the 31st, but we know, the AI knows, that the payment run from that supplier is always the 25th or the 15th or whatever. And so it's going a step beyond just helping you to manage the data. It's starting to suggest really practical things to you to say, do you want to improve your forecasting accuracy? Because I, as the AI, I'm pretty confident that this payment's going to happen, 6 days early or 25 days after even. And this is true in reconciliation as well, right? This is another really classic example where I think you've all probably sat at some point and reconciled a transaction from a bank with a transaction in your finance system. It's difficult for a rule to get it, because as soon as you step outside of those really tight parameterizations, the rules fall over. Somebody consolidates 2 invoices into a single payment. The classic automation we've been doing can't cope. But the AI can. The AI can look at it and say, I'll run those numbers. I'll know what the match is, and I'll say, well, I can see this is one payment against 2 invoices. So really classic way that these things happen. But of course, having done that, you still want that human in the loop. We're talking about that guided mode again, because you don't want to be posting something into your finance system that you're going to have to unwind. And so the AI is hopefully presenting that to you and saying, this is where we're at with this. So it was a fairly short presentation, but I really wanted to just give you that insight of how, as a software company, as an AI native company, we think about the use cases in finance and how it filters through into the software and the development that we do. And we're iterating this constantly, and we do it, a lot of that iteration is done speaking to finance leaders, finance professionals, right? And so I'd really invite you genuinely to come and find us afterwards and tell us about the problems where you see lots of manual work, lots of easy low-hanging fruit, because we'd love to talk about it, and we're constantly feeding that into the product team. And Tony and I spend a lot of time talking to them about how we're going to make the lives easier of our customers. So with that, thank you very much. We're going to break there. We're going to serve lunch upstairs in the Wheatley room. We've got some roundtables happening around AI guardrails, around governance, around FP&A, and a few other topics, and you can be directed on the way out. But equally, we'll see you upstairs in the Wheatley room, and the guys will show you the room. But lastly, thank you so much for coming, and really appreciate you taking the time out of your day to talk to us.